fun. These are poems which come across as poems from somebody having fun with language. There's also this kind of intriguing desire to find depth, and it tends to be a desire which is thwarted in some way. I'm thinking of two poems in particular: Cave Dive, but also Worship, which is about sunbathing, and actually a lot of your poems have that sensation that you have when you've been sunbathing. Not that I do it very often, being rather pasty, but when you have been sunbathing or out in the sun, and then you go into a dark, cool room, and suddenly you feel very heady.
Yeah,
you know, there's that sense of
you've
something.
got a giant, swollen,
yes,
ungainly skull.
yes.
I think that it's one of those things you kind of I maybe don't analyse, but it certainly seems to be coming up a lot. Is that idea of the search for depth, which I suppose is an interest in poetry as well, and it's something that maybe is something about the process of reading poetry is a search, or is often described as a search for depth, and I'm not convinced that that's its main talent. But yeah, I find myself often writing about. Obviously it comes through my prose as well. Submarine being about that sensation of, I suppose, people functioning at different depths, and some people having personalities which feel like they're shallow is not the right word, but when you're speaking to someone and you realise that you're just not functioning on the same wavelength. And there's a few poems in there which are about trying to access different levels of understanding and levels of consciousness, and partly to do with meditation, which is something I can't do. So I suppose this is tapping into that. I've tried meditation and it's really difficult, which is the big surprise. You kind of, or at least surprise to me, patronisingly think, oh, of course I'll just go down to the fifth dimension quickly and see what's going on down there. Of course it takes a lot more dedication and a lot more practice, and my experience of it was I start meditating immediately. Any kind of success in meditating and the thought, well done me, I've just meditated, pops into view and spoils it all. And that poem Cave Dive, which is about when you're diving, you can have this thing called nitrogen narcosis, which is very interesting, and it usually happens beyond 40 metres of depth, and it can have various effects, but it can make you kind of childlike, it can make you seem drunk, it can make you playful, make you stupid. They have a test where they get a underwater chalkboard and they write 2 + 3, and you have to complete the sum in a given number of seconds to show that you're not kind of like totally mindless. And if you can't complete it in the time, you have to go back to the surface. And I met this guy who was a keen diver, and he told me a story of how he'd been on a very deep cave dive, and at the bottom had this childhood memory come back to him of being sat on his kitchen floor looking up at the underneath of the table and the chair and his parents, and how everything looked alien and weird. And I just thought it was an amazing image, and as a metaphor for how we try to kind of re-embody our pasts, and how to try and imagine what they were like in a engaging sense, and often don't manage it, and then something will happen and suddenly you feel like you're almost there, whether it's a smell or an experience or some spur. I think that's fascinating. So this is Cave Dive, and it starts with a quote: "Every 16 metres of depth is equivalent to 1 alcoholic drink." That's from The Diver's Handbook by Mauro Bertolini. He remembers being 6, lying on his back beneath a kitchen chair, gazing up at his father's unmapped nostrils, his mother's skirt riffling past like a spotted eagle ray. Underneath the dining table he found pencil marks, a quarter circle and 2 words underscored. Possible extension. Back then it was a code, or perhaps a solution to a code. On the cave bed, it takes a blue whale's long blink to fathom what 1 + 1 turns into. The sky peers down from blue-green slots like the lamp fittings of his youth. His slow mind thinks time is just another surface he can pass through, the swirling halocline that keeps us from our pasts, the fresh and the preserved. Back in his father's study, pouring a bag of marbles across the rug, in the glow from the tentacled lampshade, he holds up his bossa, sees himself swimming in its spiral reef. Letting drift his aqualung, he is either young or drunk. From his lips he scatters balls of glass.